This is Sunday's Daf Ayin. We're up to the Mishnah on the bottom of the page. The Mishnah says chitin, wheat, and sa'idin, and barley, and kusmin, which is spelt, v'hashibailis shul, which is oats, and v'hashifun, which is rye. These are the 5 grains, and all of them are chayiv in challah. And furthermore, if you have it, we'll soon see what it means, but you don't only have to have one kind, you can combine all of them. The asurim bechodesh, they are forbidden bechodesh, the new crop. Melifnei haPesach, all 5 grains are forbidden to eat before Pesach. Umelikza melifnei, you're not allowed to harvest before the omer. We don't want you to cutting for the omer, and anything we can bring the omer from, we don't want you to cut. Also, we are worried that you might end up eating it. And im heshrishu koydem la'omer, but if it took root, as we had before the omer was brought, ha'omer matir, the omer enables you to eat from it. And im la, but if not, as soon as forbidden, it's forbidden until next year. Now the Gemara we learned kusmin. If you break up the species of the grains, it's actually 2 categories. Kusmin is minchitin. Kusmin falls under the banner of wheat. Kusmin is spelt. Spelt is like wheat. Shiboilis shul, the shifun, means sa'idin. But shiboilis shul, which is oats, and shifun, which is rye, means sa'idin. They are under the family of barley. We're talking here about challah. And we said before that you can combine the grains, but not really, you can't combine all the grains. Wheat can combine with spelt, and barley can combine with everything. And barley also combined with spelt. In other words, spelt is not really wheat, it's not really barley, it's sort of in between, so it can be counted in both. Says the Gemara, what exactly are they? Kusmin is gulba, which Rashi says is spelt. Shifon is dishra, and shifon is rye, and shiboil is shul. Shiboil that look like a fox. Shibule tala. These are the stalks that look like a fox's ears. Says Gemara, only these grains. Hanin of oides v'doichin loy, not rice and not millet. Those cannot. You're not chayiv in challah, and we also know you're not. You can't be yaitz matzah, and of course we don't eat kidneys, so you can't have. Pesach either. So how do you know? In fact, the Gemara says Rabbi, which remember Rabbi Ari Psachim, on his kaira he used to have rice, fish and rice for the zroya and the beya. Says one for Korban Chagig and one for Pesach. Says the Gemara. In fact, one of the Goinim says that really it's for Avram and Yitzchak. And it's Moshe and Aaron. Sorry. It's one that I think I'm sure going. It's Moshe and Aaron, and then he said you have to have one for Miriam as well. So he would have a fish also. You have 3 things on his kaira. The fish represented Miriam, because I guess Miriam rescued Moshe from the Nilus, said the Nile. Said how do you know that only those 5 are not rice and millet? It says over here, when you will eat from the you should give to challah and everything else when you eat from the lechem oretz, and it says over there lechem oini. So we're comparing to matzah. Both have the word lechem in it. Says the Gemara, we're daf ayin amud beis, and we're learning about the 5 different kinds of grains. So the Gemara has, how do you know only 5? How do you know rice is not included, millet not included? So we make a lechem from lechem. It's like matzah. Only the 5 grains. So too by challah can only be from 5 grains. Ask the Gemara, who told you the matzah can only be out of these 5 things? Even though it says ideally one should only use wheat, not the other 4. But obviously people can't eat wheat, and you have, use spelt for others. But how do you know? How do you know that matzah cannot be made out of rice or millet? It says in Pasuk, we had the Gemara Psach in the 3rd page. You should not eat chametz, shivas, yamim, teichel, olav matzah. In the same Pasuk it says, but 7 days you should matzah. The juxtaposition of the 2 sounds like that which can become chametz is what you should make matzah out of. So it's incredible that the one thing that is most reliable to become chametz is the very thing that the Torah wants you to make a mitzvah out of and eat on Pesach, which is matzah. So that very thing you should eat matzahs. Lechem oini, poor man's bread. So we darshan it's only that which can become chametz. Others when it depends on on Pesach. Yotzu elu, the exception is rice and millet. Ain't boyin l'dei chibutz. They don't ferment. Eladei sirach, and they get spoiled. Even though they rise, they get spoiled. That's not called fermentation. Then we said in the Mishnah that we combine the different species with each other. Tana, we learned we learned that the grains, kamachim and the flour, rabatzekas, and the dough, they all combine with each other to become one piece. What exactly do we mean? In what regard? Amar Rav Kahana. So when tvua means the wheat itself, Rav Kahana said, so we're going to have different Amoraim interpreting the Braisa differently. Rav Kahana says, Li'inyan Chodesh. You talk about Chodesh, that for Chodesh, they all combine, and also if it's a kazayis, they all combine to form a kazayis. Dough together with the wheat and the flour. Rabbi Yosef Amar Li'inyan Chametz. We're talking about Chametz and Pesach. When do you have chorus? If you ate a kazayis can be joined together with these different things. The Pesach. Papa says, Li'inyan Maisa Sheni. We're talking about Maisa Sheni. You're not allowed to eat it outside of the walls of Yerushalayim. The ochel, if you ate it, chutz l'chaim, if you ate it outside the walls of Yerushalayim, lucky you will get malchus, and they all combine. Rabbi says, no, I differently all of you. It's talking about here, li'inyan tumas oichlin. Talking about the tumah of food. Say tumah, machlekes, whether receiving tumah has to be the size of an egg as well. But when it comes to teach you the tvua u'kamachin, what he's trying to tell you is when you combine for tumas oichlin, the wheat and the flour, it has to be similar to the dough. In what way? Ma hasam oichlin be'ena, just like over there, when it comes to the dough, it has to be dough and no other to calculate the egg. It has to be pure dough. We don't include the shells of the barley and so on. Because that's not really food, nobody eats it. We need the food itself. But Tanya, we actually learned. We're talking about barley now. We actually learned. When it comes to wheat, bein klufa, whether it's peeled, bein she'ena klufa, it's not peeled, and it still has its cover on it, it is considered food, because people used to eat the cover. It's very tender. Mitztarefes, it combines. So when it comes to barley, it's a different story altogether. Barley, kilufa, if it's peeled, then mitztarefes. Obviously, it combines with it. But she'ena klufa, if barley is not peeled, ain't mitztarefes, because people don't really eat the shell of the barley, or because it's like a chatzitza, between it's not really touching the next part to combine them together, because it's thick. So when Aini, it's not so. But Tony Bishmal actually said, "Al kol zer zrua sheyizra." It says in the pasuk that it's mekabel tum over there. It says there that if an avela fell on anything that grows, the normal way of planting any seed that you normally plant, it becomes tummy. And he says over there the way people normally take out for planting. So when you plant wheat, you put the shell on it. And he says barley also. They used to have the shell on it. And adoshim b'klipos, and so too lentils with the shell on it. And you just said a minute ago that barley has to be peeled in order to be considered food and it can be contact tumah. So well, like kasha. Depends if it's moist or dry. If it's moist, then even barley is edible, so it's food, and therefore can become calculated as part of the egg to be the size of an egg to be metame. And here we're talking about if it's dry, it's not edible. Then you said furthermore, vasidin b'chodesh melifnei Pesach is forbidden chodesh from before Pesach. Says the Gemara, how do you know? How do you know that it's all forbidden that these grains? The question is, according to Rashi, how do you know these 5 grains? How do you know that it excludes rice and millet? Or other Rishonim say, how do you know the 5 grains are all forbidden to eat before Pesach? Maybe only barley. Since the mincha is out of barley, maybe the only thing you're not allowed to eat prior to that is barley, but wheat and everything else you can. Rish Lakish asks, we learn out lechem matzah. We said before, lechem matzah, that includes all of them. And then it says, we don't want you to harvest before the Omer. How do you know that? How do you know we shouldn't be harvesting? It says in the pasuk, reishis k'tzirchem. The first thing that you should be cutting and harvesting, the first thing should be the omer. So that's how we know you shouldn't be cutting anything before then as well. So the Gemara asks, okay. Omar Rabbi Yehuda says, Asya, we learn out. How do we learn out? Reishis mechala. Again, how do you know it includes all 5 grains? maybe only barley. We learn that Reishi is from challah. It says over here in the pasuk, you should tell them when they come to Israel and do. It says reish oimer reish tzirchem. They should bring the oimer the reish tzirchem, and then it says by challah it says reish is adis seichem. So we learn that just over there. So the grains over here also the grains. My koidim la oimer. What do you mean when you say before the oimer? You're not allowed to cut. Right now, we're not allowed to cut before the Omer. Rabbi Yochanan says koidim ktzilas Omer. Rabbi Yochanan says before but cutting the Omer. But once you cut the Omer, let's say at night, the night of the second day of Pesach, then you're allowed to. Rabbi Yosef Bazav Omer koidim havas Omer. Before you bring the Omer. Before you bring the Omer, says the Gemara. And we're talking about eating now. So according to which one Rashi learns, Rabbi Yochanan says that you're not allowed to eat until you cut the omer. You cut the omer, which l'chayda would seem that you're allowed to eat the chodesh already at night. And we know that we had before Homachlek is Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Yechon Shlakish. Rabbi Shmuel said that you have to wait until the omer grew up, and Shlakish, Rabbi Yechon said, no, first thing in the morning you're allowed to eat. It's only a mitzvah to wait till the omer, but you're allowed to for the first thing in the morning. Technically, there's no lav anymore. And this is going to be the same machlek as here. The only thing is, when you say omer, you cut in the beginning of the night, and you're allowed to eat already. That's very different than everybody else. So Rashi says we don't mean the beginning of the night. You cut at night, but you eat first thing in the morning. Another opinion says when you bring the omer. So why does it say k'tiras omer? So Rashi says because it's possible that you can cut the omer right before dawn, and right after that is already the sunrise. So therefore you can go ahead and eat. Taisa doesn't like the pshat at all, but that's how Rashi learns. Something what Rabbi Yochanan says koyim k'tiras omer. Rabbi Yochanan said before you cut the omer, that means before the morning. As soon as the morning comes around, you can start eating the chodesh. Rabbi Yochanan says avdama like Rabbi Yechon Shlakish. Rabbi Yochanan says avdama koyim habas omer like Rabbi Shmuel from when you bring the omer. Now we learned asuri. Sorry. You're not allowed to eat chodesh lifnei Pesach. This is what it says. In the Mishnah, it says you're not allowed to eat chodesh before. Rashi said to swap around. You're not allowed to eat chodesh before the omer, the liktzer. You're not allowed to cut before Pesach. Now remember, if you're not allowed to cut before Pesach, the first day Yom Tov you're not allowed to cut anyway. It's Yom Tov. So the first time you're allowed to cut is the Mitzvah Yom Tov, the night of the Nix. So therefore, you're not allowed to cut before Pesach. Now, so you're giving us two different times. Now remember, one opinion said that you're allowed to eat right after you cut. So the cutting and the eating are really the same time, yet the Mishnah separates them as two different times. So the one who said that you have to wait to eat until you actually brought the omer, but the harvesting is mitzvah yom tov. I understand. That's why the Mishnah doesn't count them together. But the one who says it's before cutting the omer, la arvinu v'lisninu. Why don't you mix it? It's both hold. It's the same time. First thing in the morning, you can cut the whole night and even till the morning, and then you eat first thing in the morning. So la arvinu v'lisninu, put them together. Asudin b'chodesh, the liktzer lifnei Pesach. Say that you're not allowed to eat chodesh, you're not allowed to cut before Pesach. We'll learn where Rashi and Taisa doesn't really like this because, as we said before, eating is in the morning, cutting is at night. It's not really the same time. You're right. This argument is actually about a different matter altogether. Asay vitmar. It says that if it took root before the omer, the omer enables it. My what do you mean before the omer? What do you mean before the omer? No, if it took root before the omer, when does it actually have to take root in the ground? As long as it took root before the trace, or before you brought the omer, it's good enough. He says it means before you cut the omer at night. It has to take root during the first day Yom Tov. Rabbi Elazar said to Rabbi Yosha, the daughter, he said Rabbi Yosha from his generation, like taste of a karach, I don't want you to sit down until you explain me the following part of the Mishnah. It says in the Mishnah, Menayin, how do you know? We're saying the whole time you don't have to be fully grown. Even if it just took root, it's good enough. The omer enables you to eat that. How do you know that? He asked him. How do you know? So he answered. It says, I want you. We just had this in Parsha Vayikra. It says, I want you to take the intakriv mincha b'kun Hashem aviv. I want you to use for the mincha omer the most ripe. Sounds like, but you can eat even though it's not ripe. But the omer itself should be from the most ripe. So that's how we know that even if it's not fully ripe, it's included in the heter of the omer. Just the omer itself should be brought avid. Lav miklal, you can lav avid. There are other things that are not fully ripe. I don't want you to use those, even though you're allowed to eat. You're allowed to eat after bringing the omer. I want you to use something better. The lab, but the lab avi. So how do you know? Maybe Dilma the lab avi, right? Doesn't have to be fully ripe, but who said it take root? Maybe it has to still be a stalk. Ul oilam the ayol shlish. Maybe it has to be a third ready. A third ready is considered ripe. You can eat it. It's edible. Maybe it has to be at least that much ready. You're telling me that even there's nothing growing. Elam Shmuel, I'll tell you how we know. It says he said when you should bring the omer, the hachel chermesh bakama. When you start using the sickle bakama in what's standing up. I mean, that's what I should make the omer from. That means, but everything else, even though it's not really standing up, not ready to be using a sickle, that's still a crop, you can eat it. That's how we know. Those that you cannot use a sickle. So the Gemara said again, Dilma the lam bar chamish. Okay, it's not ready to use a sickle, but it's still growing. Well, oilam shachas, but it's still like animal fodder. It still grew something. How you know taking root, which means there's nothing visible. It says in the pasuk, from when you start using sickle, that kama. It has to be something that kama that stands out, that stands up. You're saying here that the omer has to be kama. The omer has to be something standing up. It means that even if it's not kama, you can eat it. It's considered crop, but not for the omer. Miklal, the laba kama is good enough. Says him again. Oh, dilma, perhaps the lav bar kama. Okay, it's not really called a bar kama. Or the oilam agam. Maybe it grew a little bit the blade, and that you can bend it over, fold it over itself. You need something to be visible. Who said that just taking root is good enough? Elamarav. I'll tell you how I know. It says a pasuk regarding Shavuos. It says, "Asher tizra chaga kotzir." It says, "Bekurim you should give asher tizra basada," that you plant in the field, which tells you mishaz zriya. The moment that it says that it talks about the chaga kotzir, that you plant in the field from the moment, it's talking about the shvus. The shtei lechem comes to be matter, the wheat for the mizbech, but the same thing will be for omer, that it's matter for everybody else to eat. And it says there that mishas zriya, you're allowed to already include that in the shtei lechem. And now remember, when it says there, even though it says zriya, it can't not really be talking about the shtei lechem, because the shtei lechem only permits you to eat things which the omer already permitted you. Can't be, remember we had before, it has to be in sequence. Can't be that a shtei lechem is going to be matzah something that the omer won't. So when it says in the pasuk asher tizru, it's really that tizru part must be talking about the omer. It was already planted by the time the omer came around. So we see that what has to be done before the omer comes around, all you need to do is plant it. So I forgot Tizra means planting, just placing in the ground. Who said it has to take root? Maybe it doesn't even have to take root. As soon as you plant it in the ground, it can be included in the omer. And even though it grew 6 months later, he said Sudni. He said, my great Talmud Chacham. Why are Talmud Chacham called Sudni? Because we say Soid Hashem L'Reyev. The Talmid Chacham, they know all the secrets of Hashem. Or Sudni, another Pshat Rashi gives it because he used to make beer and he had a secret recipe on how to make the beer. So he was a said, he knew how to keep a secret well. And this secret is, we call Sudna because it's a very good secret. So no, it made him rich. He was a very rich man. So we answer, Basodek Siv, that it has to be Basod, it has to be in the field, it has to take root, it has to become part of the field. Okay, continue tomorrow in Mitzvah Hashem, and maybe we'll